Welcome, everyone. I'm Ted Earhart. We're still in the middle of the COVID-19 global pandemic, and I keep hearing about two things that it seems like people are talking about you're supposed to do. One of those being grow a beard, and this is my sad attempt at doing that. The second thing people have been asking me about is Roth conversions. With stock prices being down this year significantly, is there an opportunity to do a Roth conversion? So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. We'll look at, talk about, first of all, what is a Roth conversion? Is there an opportunity to do one right now? And last but not least, some other important considerations as you assess this approach. Whether, there's a couple things that people in the media are talking about this, but they don't often talk about the tax side of things. And so it's important. I want to spend some time on that. Of course, I want to mention there's all kinds of nuance, and IRAs can be complicated. So I'm going to try to keep this high level for the sake of time and keep this as simple as possible. So there's, of course, always exceptions to everything I say here, but so that's just kind of a little disclosure before we get going. But first of all, what is a Roth conversion? Well, you have to understand the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA to understand this. With a traditional IRA or rollover IRA, where I would estimate probably 80 to 90% of all retirement dollars are in traditional IRA type vehicles, those what are known as pre-tax savings vehicles. So money goes in on a before tax basis into these types of retirement accounts. When it comes out, it's fully taxable to you as ordinary income. So if you take a $10,000 distribution, oftentimes after tax, you really only have 7,000 or 8,000 depending on where your effective tax rate is. Roth IRAs kind of work the opposite way. You pay the tax up front, but the benefit is down the road when you're taking distributions, they're totally tax-free. There's a couple other important features that people like. Number one, Roth IRAs are not subject to the required minimum distribution rules. So once you're over age 70 and a half, or now age 72 with the recent law change, you don't have to take money out of a Roth. Finally, Roth IRAs transfer to beneficiaries on a tax-free basis, so people like that as well. And by tax-free basis, I mean the distributions that beneficiaries take when they inherit those accounts are tax-free. So those are some features that a lot of folks like, and therefore they like the idea of doing a conversion, that is converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. To do that, it's pretty simple. You basically just have to pay the tax on all the money that you're converting into a Roth. Now, when stock prices are down, that can present an opportunity to do a Roth conversion because you're probably going to get a tax break. And let me give you a little example to explain why. So let's take a look at a hypothetical. We'll go back to January 1st of this year. Stock prices were basically near all-time highs. Let's say you had a $100,000 IRA at that point in time. Again, this is all pre-tax money. If you wanted to convert this account, we'll just, for example purposes, say you have a 20% effective tax rate. It would cost you $20,000 in taxes to do that conversion. The benefit, again, would be that, well, all future withdrawals that you would take from your new Roth IRA would be totally tax-free. Again, you're just paying the tax up front. But here's where the opportunity lies. So we have, of course, seen a huge contraction in stock prices, although they've bounced back a little bit off their March lows. From peak to trough, stocks declined by about 35%. So we're just going to use that in our example. Let's look at how the circumstances have changed. Had you waited with your IRA until March 23rd of this year, in this hypothetical example, let's say that this account was now worth only $65,000. And again, to keep things simple, we're just going to stick with our effective tax rate at 20%, although it very well could be lower if you're converting a smaller amount. That aside, the point is you can see the tax bill to do this conversion is much lower because the account value is much lower. So there is an opportunity here to do conversions with lower account values, and that means that any rebound that we see in the future, once you take withdrawals, will be totally tax-free. So that is the attractiveness of doing a conversion while stock prices are down. But here's another important consideration, or a couple of things you need to think about. How do you pay the taxes? If you don't have the cash to pay the income tax on the conversion, it's a much less attractive opportunity for a number of reasons. Let's just say, first of all, if you're under 59 and a half, you really have to have the cash outside of the retirement account itself to pay the taxes. If you don't, you're going to be subject to a 10% penalty. So to unpack what I mean, let's say you thought you were going to do a conversion, a $100,000 conversion, and it was going to cost $20,000 of income tax. Well, if you used $20,000 from the IRA itself to pay the tax, and you're under age 59 and a half, that $20,000 would be considered an early withdrawal and subject to a 10% penalty. So you'd owe another $2,000 in penalties if, again, you paid the taxes from monies that were in the IRA itself. So if you're under 59 and a half, to avoid that, you have to have the cash somewhere outside of a retirement account to do the conversion. And oftentimes when I'm talking to people, this kind of blows up the potential of executing this strategy. The other thing is, even if you are over 59 and a half, you still, in an ideal situation, want to pay the income tax burden with dollars outside of the account, and here's why. Again, let's go back to our $65,000 example. Let's assume that you're paying the tax bill for the Roth conversion with money that you have, just say, in a regular savings account. So you're converting $65,000, and therefore $65,000 is remaining invested. In this example, let's say you had 5 times growth over 20 or 30 years. Your 65 would become $325,000 of tax-free money. But you would, if you're over 59 and a half, have the option of paying the tax bill. 20% in this case is $13,000 from the IRA or from the conversion itself. But that means you would only be putting a net $52,000 to work. And you can see down the road that's significant opportunity cost. The other thing that's important to think about is this $13,000, you would basically be locking in a loss because this, whatever your dollar amount here, if you had 65,000, you'd have to liquidate some investments to create this cash to pay taxes. That money would be permanently lost, and again, you'd really be locking in losses, and therefore, it's just not the ideal situation to actually pay the taxes due on a conversion from the IRA itself. So those are really some of the key considerations when you think about whether or not you should do a conversion right now. With stock prices being down, there definitely is an opportunity to do a conversion on a much smaller basis and therefore have a much lower tax liability. But you really want to make sure that you have the cash outside of the retirement account itself to pay the taxes when they're ultimately due next year. So that's a little bit about Roth conversions. As usual, we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll try to keep you up to date on what's happening in the world and other things that may be of interest. Thanks for tuning in.